It's the last weekend of April and spring is still overdue. I'm Charlie Sykes. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, Time magazine names Governor Scott Walker to its list of the 100 most influential people in the world. The Public Service Commission tells Milwaukee that if it wants an expensive new streetcar, it will have to pay for the utility costs itself. City of Franklin turns down a proposed stadium for a minor league baseball team. The U.S. Supreme Court upholds Michigan's ban on affirmative action. The FDA proposes new rules restricting e-cigarettes. And Senator Rand Paul visits Milwaukee and touts the success of school choice. But we start with the growing debate over a new Bucks arena. ESPN reported last week that under the deal to sell the Bucks, the NBA has the right to buy back the team from incoming owners Wesley Edens and Mark Lasry if a deal to bring a new arena to the city is not in place by November 2017. The new owners paid $550 million to buy the team from former Senator Herb Kohl, but according to ESPN, the deal allows the league to buy the team from them for $575 million if construction on a new building in Milwaukee is not underway by the deadline. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, the owners of the Golden State Warriors announced plans to privately finance the entire cost of a $600 million new arena in that city. Joining me on our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Michael Holt, political consultant Mary Jo Boss, political strategist Linda Bruin, and media trackers Brian Sikma. So, Brian, does this change the story, change the dynamic of these two stories? Number one, the NBA option to purchase the team. Number two, the fact that in San Francisco, you actually have their billionaire owners who are willing to finance the stadium. It
absolutely changes the story. You remember whenever they announced the Bucks deal, that seemed like it was the greatest thing ever to happen to Milwaukee. Finally, the Bucks' woes will be solved. Now we're finding out the new investors have really no skin in the game in all of this. They can actually make a small profit off of their purchase of the team.
Very small, though.
Very small, but still a profit. They're not going to lose money on this team if they don't have a new arena built by 2017 or a new plan in place. I think the Bucks are a very expensive status symbol right now. We've already had comments from other people outside the Milwaukee area saying they don't want to pay for the new arena. The city has big problems right now. If the Bucks themselves can't turn around their ticket sales and fill up the BMO Harris Center, I don't think there's going to be a lot of excitement for people to underwrite their new arena.
Linda Bruin, but I mean, we're talking about a $650 million potential investment in the city. I mean, there's obviously tremendous upside. But were you surprised to hear about the NBA deal where they would buy the team? Because doesn't that, I mean, in terms of the game changer aspect of it, so there really was no commitment, there's no guarantee?
Well, I think it helps explain why these owners are willing to do it, because this is, this is a small franchise with an underperforming team with the worst arena in the whole NBA. For now. But, there's some real positive things happening in the NBA for small market teams like this in the near future, including the set labor contract and the new media deal that could boost it. So I think it helped reduce the risk for these owners very much. And Herb Kohl said there were 10 valid offers on the table, so clearly this was the best one.
Well, we were sort of led to believe that there was a guarantee that they were going to stay in Milwaukee, so we got the carrot and then we got the stick, and they didn't bother to mention that to us during the first go-around. And what I said on the air was, Mark Lasry, one of the new owners, he's known for his high-stakes, he's a poker player. And obviously, we found out that he had some cards in his hand that he hadn't told us about.
Yeah, 3 aces, in fact. And you talk about small profit. We talk about $20 million profit.
25.
$25 million profit. Sure, that's a pretty good deal. I would venture to guess. You still talk about the stick and carrot. I would venture to guess that if the NBA gets a hold of his team, they are not going to be in Milwaukee the next day. I wouldn't be surprised if they move to Chicago or someplace else. What kind of economic impact will it have on the city of Milwaukee to lose the Milwaukee Bucks? That's the conversation we really need to be having. Downtown is close to death already. You take away the Bradley Center, you take away the Bucks, it's dead.
Okay. Mary Jo Boss.
This doesn't surprise me at all. I assumed it was a factor that if they didn't get the new arena, they could leave. I think what it's important to focus on is if we can get a deal together, they won't leave. These guys came in as they didn't come in as philanthropists. They came in as business people. They are looking to make a profit. They want to make this team succeed, but they do want it to succeed. And if we can get the arena deal together, we're got $200 million already.
But what is the deal? Because it's pretty obvious that ideas like a regional sales tax are dead on arrival. The super TIF district, a very, very hard sell. Does not look like legislative Republicans are anxious to approve this. So what does it look like? Because I think it would be obviously a net positive to have that kind of investment downtown. But the question is, you know, how do the numbers work?
I think you have to get every potential player in. You have to get Marquette in, the Admirals. I don't think it's unreasonable to think that there might be state money, even if it's not in the form of the sales tax, or I think there's possibility to get something in
Why
there.
should there be any state money? Why should taxpayers be paying for basically a playground for millionaires and billionaires?
Every time Christina Aguilera comes to town, every time Kobe, you know, every one of them comes to town, they pay income tax.
Okay.
But I think, you know, that's a good point. But at the same time, we have, and Michael mentioned we can't afford to lose them, but what is it going to cost taxpayers to keep them? You know, time and time again, if this was a profitable enterprise, people would put money into this. There would be private investors that would do these market studies, that would look at what takes place with the BMO Harris Center and invest in it. If they're not investing in it, why should taxpayers be the ones paying for it?
And that's where the West Coast deal that you brought up at the beginning is important, because it says, look, that is a viable option out there. And I think what that does is it makes it more of an even playing field, that it doesn't automatically have to be taxpayer dollars, that it could be maybe a blend, you know, that type of thing.
You're a former member of the Milwaukee County Board. You know how long and complicated deals like this are to put together. Are we going to be able to meet a 2017 deadline? It's 2014.
Oh, I think so.
You think we will?
Absolutely. These are the types of deals that if there actually becomes a viable deal, the local government will not stand in the way.
What has your glass half full and what has your glass half empty this week? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt.
My glass is half full because gasoline prices dipped 5 cents, 5 whole cents in the last week. My glass is half empty because gas prices have been insultingly high for the last 5 months.
Don't take it so personally. Mary Jo Boss.
My glass is half full because on Wednesday, Rand Paul listened to Milwaukee educators and parents talk about what's working and why in education reform. My glass is half empty because the very next day, the Liberal Institute for Wisconsin's Future came to town to defend the failed MPS status quo and to rail against education reform.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my glass is half full because Congress is investigating VA hospitals in 5 states that have allowed veterans to die while waiting for medical care. My glass is half empty because more than 120 veterans have died while waiting. The VA has not held anyone accountable, and Congress was slow in starting the investigation.
Brian Sickma.
Well, my glass is half empty because the failed rollout of the Obamacare website delayed reforms to Wisconsin's Badger Care program. But my glass is half full because this week we learned of a 1,600-page report that shows just how hard the Walker administration is working to reform this state entitlement program.
Well, my glass is half full because community leaders here are finally talking about the rise of violent crime in Milwaukee. It's half empty because they're talking about another gun buyback program that would turn guns into garden tools. Nice. Feel-good stuff that won't do a thing about crime. Next on Sunday Insight, will a ruling from the Public Service Commission derail plans for a streetcar in Milwaukee? A setback for Milwaukee Mayor Tom Barrett and his streetcar plan. The State Public Service Commission said the city cannot shift tens of millions of dollars of utility relocation costs onto ratepayers. That means the city will have to come up with another $20 to maybe $50 million to pay to relocate the cables and conduits that would be disrupted by the trolley. The state legislature voted earlier this year to bar that cost shift. The initial price tag for the 2.1-mile streetcar was around $65 million, but the PSC ruling means that cost may be approaching $100 million. City's expected to appeal that ruling. So, is the streetcar dead or on life support system?
It's certainly close to dead. Unfortunately, I don't think Barrett knows it yet. The city has had millions of dollars of transit money for over 20 years, and it's tied up in this wrangling over a trolley that will never happen. And for a city that can't even pay to fill its own potholes, that's insane.
Okay, Linda Bruin.
Well, I don't think it's dead either, because the state has paid millions and millions of dollars to relocate utilities. It's not unheard of for a city or a state government to do that. The problem is, how do they raise the $20 million, and how does that add on to the annual operating costs, which is about $2.5 million a year? So the bottom line is the city's going to have to look really long and hard as to whether or not they want to put that kind of investment into this type
and this is just a down payment, because you go onto the website of the Milwaukee streetcar route and you see that Tom Barrett has some rather elaborate plans to extend this thing, and if they build a new arena, you'd want to extend it. So we're not talking about 2.1 miles or $100 million. We may be talking about 2-3 times that much.
Right, and one of the reasons some of that money has never been spent is because first everybody fought over whether to do light rail, and now it's this one. So this has been an ongoing thing for decades.
Okay. Brian Sickler.
Well, I think the whole issue here is that Milwaukee continues to misjudge its transportation needs. You know, as Mary Jo mentioned, you have potholes on the roads right now. You also have taxi systems, but we have a very limited system because the medallion lines in place. I think this is a very expensive pet project by Mayor Barrett, and somehow it fulfills whatever the East Side people want as far as a green transportation agenda, but it's not very practical.
Did the PSC get it right and basically say that no, you cannot shift that cost onto people who pay electric bills and gas bills around the state, that if you want to do this, you have to pay for it?
Well, actually, I've gone on record saying I'm opposed to this project. I think the money would be better spent providing transportation from the central city to some suburbs so minorities can get some jobs. That said, no, they didn't get it right. And the state didn't get it right before when they came up with the legislation. How is this really different from repairing streets? Utilities then have to pay. The expressway, the whole ball of wax, utilities have to relocate and absorb the cost, which they pass on to us anyway. This is too politicized to the point where it can be totally disruptive.
Well, anytime you're dealing with tax money, it's politicized. I think that the criticism of the PSC and the legislature for interfering with local control is absurd because, first of all, as you know, as Lynn and Mary Jo have pointed out, the money is federal tax money. What Tom Barrett wanted to do was basically a backdoor regional tax by forcing ratepayers throughout southeastern Wisconsin to pay higher utility rates. And by the way, most people have paid higher utility rates for the summer. So, for this winter. So the question of local control, I think, is absurd because if, in fact, this was local money, I don't think there's any way that they would be doing this streetcar. There'd be no way that we'd be talking about, you know, this kind of money for a streetcar if they had to pull it out of their own pockets. Would they?
No, but that's
so. What's the local control?
But that's not the reality of all this type of construction is that the vast majority of the money comes from the federal government, and the belief, the reason why the city thinks that the statewide that should be an input in is that they believe there's a statewide economic benefit of it, and that's where you get
statewide economic
see,
benefit
that's where you get the big debate. I know,
of a 2.1
but not if it's expanded, right, Charlie?
Downtown.
And our previous discussion about the arena shows just how absurd this whole fixed line trolley is.
Yes.
They're still trying to work the arena deal. What if they move it? What if they build this thing?
This is a great point, by the way.
Taxis can change routes, buses can change routes, trolleys can't.
Exactly. If you do the fixed rail, what if we had gone ahead and done the fixed rail where the old Harley Museum was, where the Harley Museum was supposed to be? Oops, it's not really there. In terms of the arena, what if you put the line to the current Bradley Center and then you build an arena someplace else? This is the inherent problem with a fixed rail system. Now, you may not want to hear it, but we're going to tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice, Michael Holt.
Well, mine is the State Senator Glenn Grothman, who said he wants to put a stake through the heart of affirmative action. Please, get on your pony and ride off into the political sunset and take your mean spirit and or racist agenda with you.
Mary Jo Boss.
To the people working on financing the new arena for the Bucks, it's time to stop looking at the tax hike model of Oklahoma City and start looking at the 100% private funding model of the Golden State Warriors for their new arena in San Francisco.
Yeah, see? Linda Braun.
When a teenager can climb an airport fence, cross the airport grounds, and climb inside an airplane wheel completely undetected, airports need to make it more difficult for civilians and terrorists to get near an airplane.
Brian Sickma.
Well, my unsolicited advice is from Milwaukee Mayor Tom Barrett. We all know that the trolley project is your pet project, but drop it. There are more important and pressing problems like crime for you to solve.
Well, my advice is to Major League Baseball, if you want to avoid those big brawls, do what other sports do and suspend anybody who comes onto the field who doesn't belong there. Just see how that works. Next on Sunday Insight, Democrats get yet another candidate for governor. Will Brett Hulsey present a serious challenge to Mary Burke? The Democrats get another candidate for governor. Colorful, often unpredictable, State Representative Brett Hulsey launched a long-shot, low-budget campaign against the anointed Democrat candidate, Mary Burke. His first announcement, he would be making his own chicken costume. And the idea is that either he or supporters would wear the chicken costume to Burke events to highlight his charge that she is too chicken to repeal Act 10 or to enact a vigorous liberal agenda. So is he going to pose a problem for Mary Burke?
No, but it's going to be more fun to watch the campaign. Yeah. She's already got two other potential challengers. Assuming that these other three challengers to her get enough signatures, she'll have a primary. But
big assumption.
Yeah. And I'm not so sure how much the press is going to treat even Hulsey with credibility. On the other hand, print a lot of the things he says. He seems to go after Mary Burke, but he's also very adept at going after Scott Walker. So I think the real issue is he has two opponents. And he has two opponents for his own re-election, which is this is his way of exiting politics with a bang.
Okay, is it going to be a bang?
He is going to be very dangerous for Mary Burke. He has no fear, no shame, and nothing to lose. He can say anything he wants to expose her for being, in his eyes, too liberal. And while we think of him as a nut job, in Madison, he's considered an upstanding legislator who represents their views. I think he's very.
He doesn't have a
easy
chance to beat her, though. He's not going to win this primary.
He actually has a chance to make her. He can't do anything in the primary, but he could damage her for the general.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you put a political candidate on the defensive, which she will probably end up being.
But she's just going to ignore him, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, she won't be able to ignore him if the media takes his candidacy seriously. If they start running headlines, then she will have to respond.
Will the media cover? I mean, so far as I can tell, the Burke campaign, the Democratic Party has had nothing to say about Brett Hulsey. Is the media going to treat him like a credible candidate?
I think it depends on how Brett Hulsey conducts himself. Yeah. The media can't resist a good story, and if Brett Hulsey can go out there and craft a good story, he can get an earned media campaign of sorts together. He stands no chance in the Democratic primary.
But
he's talking about all the issues.
The chicken suit.
The chicken. I mean, if you have a Democratic candidate for governor wearing a chicken costume, he's also an elected official. Don't forget that this guy is a state representative, so he has some level of credibility. If he appears outside of a Burke campaign event, somebody's going to have to talk about that.
But that appeals to uber liberal Democrats. The reality
is
in a primary. But once the primary's over and Mary Burke is the candidate, they're not then going to jump to Scott Walker. The bottom line is he's actually making her look more conservative and to a lot more moderate and to a lot of independents that actually could help her in the long run. So it's a toss.
Here's the danger: is that she has this very carefully crafted, somewhat plastic image. They've gone through all the focus groups. She hasn't really broken through. And he's going to be taking pokes at some of her areas of vulnerability. I mean, he's already talking about all the jobs that they've outsourced at Trek. He's talking about she's too chicken to show up with Barack Obama. She's too chicken to not. And you've mentioned that in the past. These are issues, quite frankly, that I don't know that Walker's folks were going to be able to do, that they were going to be able to make fun of. So when you have somebody who has not defined themselves as Mary Burke has, somebody making fun, having people laugh at you might do a little bit of damage.
I don't buy it. I think it's actually going to help her with independence.
Okay, is what they said this week the same as what you heard? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt.
Nevada Tea Party celebrity Cleve Bundy said, "Black people abort their young and put their young men in jail because they never learned how to pick cotton. They would be better off in slavery," he said. The fact that many Tea Party members are trying to justify Bundy's racist rant speaks volumes about American politics and race relations.
Mary Jo Boss.
Criticizing congressional opponents Glenn Grothman and Joe Libam, Dewey Strobel said, "I don't think conservatives should trade one career politician for another. What I heard was, I can't match their experience or conservative credentials."
Linda Bruin.
When a Delaware judge recently suspended the 8-year prison sentence of a man convicted of raping his daughter, the judge said this was because the defendant will not fare well in prison. But what I heard was a morally corrupt judge letting a rapist go free because this rapist happens to be the wealthy heir to the DuPont family fortune.
Brian Sikma.
Well, recently the Democratic Party of Wisconsin attacked Governor Scott Walker and Republicans for failing to eliminate the so-called gender pay gap. Well, what media trackers heard was a lot of hypocrisy. The Democratic Party of Wisconsin, like the Obama administration, pays its female employees less than it pays its male employees.
Well, they said that the new owners were committed to staying in Milwaukee with the basketball team. What I heard, build the new arena or we are out of here. Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Michael Holt, you're first.
Loser, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld a voter-approved change to the Michigan Constitution that ends affirmative action for higher education. I guess that ruling officially ends the farce of equal opportunity in America. My winner, residents of the 15 automatic district will be winners if they show up for Tuesday's special election and vote for Russell Stamper. I've known Russell since he was a kid. He not only comes from good stock, but we put the interests of his constituents before those of other special interests.
Mary Jo Boss.
Brett Healy is my winner this week. As a lone private citizen and utility tax ratepayer, he took on Milwaukee City Hall by bringing the streetcar challenge before the Public Service Commission and won. Thank you. My loser is Tony Evers in the Department of Public Instruction for not revoking the license of Middleton teacher Andrew Harris, who was caught viewing porn on the job.
Linda Broom.
My winner is 22-year-old Park Ji-young, who was a crew member of the South Korean ferry that sunk and likely claimed the lives of more than 300 passengers. This young woman provided medical care, helped passengers escape, and refused to wear a life jacket herself until jackets were given to all of the passengers. Sadly, Park is one of the confirmed dead, but her bravery stands in direct contrast to my losers, the 9 crew members facing criminal charges for their horrific actions that day.
Brian Sikma.
Well, my winner this week is Congressman Reed Ribble, a Republican. Ribble has been repeatedly protested by the left-wing group Wisconsin Jobs Now. But this week we learned that while Wisconsin Jobs Now has never held a job fair to help people find work, Ribble has held 6 job fairs to help constituents find work. My loser this week is Mary Burke. In an overlooked story in the Cap Times, one-time Trek bicycle executive Denise DeMard said that Mary Burke was part of the team that helped the company outsource jobs from Wisconsin. That means Burke's assertion she didn't outsource jobs is false.
Mayor Barrett's streetcar has been a boondoggle from the get-go. More than $60 million for a 2.1-mile line. Last week it got a lot more expensive, and Tom Barrett has no idea how to pay for it. That makes it the week's biggest loser. My winner, the people and the law enforcement officials of the city of Boston. They pulled off a magnificent comeback with a flawless marathon. Boston strong indeed. Thanks for joining us. Join me for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.